You know, there's something quietly mysterious that happens to certain people. They walk into a room and it's as if they absorb everything at once, the unspoken tension between two friends, the forced brightness in someone's laughter, the invisible weight behind a polite smile. It's strange, isn't it? We're told this kind of sensitivity is a gift. You have a good intuition, they say. You just see things other people miss. And that sounds flattering, until it isn't. Because what if this variability, this crystal clarity of perception, isn't purely a blessing at all? What if it's something far more complicated, even dangerous? Not dangerous like standing near the edge of a cliff, but dangerous in a quieter, more devastating way. The danger of seeing too clearly. Of becoming so awake, so acutely aware, that you can no longer participate in the soft illusions that allow most people to live in comfort. Have you ever stopped to truly watch people at a social gathering? Not just look, really observe. You'll notice they're all playing a game, a perfectly rehearsed play, though no one ever wrote down the rules. You ask someone how they're doing, they answer, "I'm fine," and you both pretend that's the whole truth. You compliment the host. You laugh at jokes that aren't funny. You nod at stories you've heard a dozen times before. It's not hypocrisy, it's survival. It's a shared, unspoken pact: stay light, stay pleasant, stay shallow. Don't peer beneath the surface. Don't look too deeply. But then, there's you. The one who can't help but see. You notice the wife who stiffens when her husband's voice hardens. You feel the loneliness hiding in the man who tells the loudest jokes. You sense the tremor of anxiety that moves through the group like a hidden current under calm water. And once you see these things, you can never unsee them. That's where it begins, the quiet danger. Because your perception doesn't just reveal others. It changes you. You become the mirror in which people glimpse the truths they've worked so hard to hide, not only from you, but from themselves. And they don't like it. They can't like it. When you see clearly, when you perceive the hidden structures beneath polite interaction, you're breaking the invisible contract that holds social life together. You're calling attention to what everyone has agreed not to acknowledge. And that makes you, unconsciously, a threat. Not because people are malicious. Not because they wish you harm. But because your presence unsettles their balance. You illuminate the very illusions they need in order to function. Think of society as a grand theater. Everyone plays a role: the devoted mother, the ambitious worker, the charming friend. Each performance depends on everyone staying in character. The lights shine, the dialogue flows, the story feels real. But you, with your piercing awareness, you stand up in the audience and whisper, "It's just a play." Can you imagine how unwelcome that whisper would be? The first danger of seeing too clearly is isolation. Not the simple loneliness of being alone on a Friday night. No, something deeper. The solitude of living in a reality that overlaps with everyone else's but isn't quite the same. You inhabit a parallel world, one where truth cuts through appearances like light through fog. You start speaking a language that others don't understand. You feel things that others refuse to feel. And the more clearly you see, the more profoundly separate you become. It's not arrogance. It's gravity. The truth, once seen, has a weight that gently pulls you away from the games everyone else still plays. I once knew someone, let's call her Sarah. Sarah had this rare ability to read people instantly. She could walk into a room and sense who was genuine, who was performing, who was hurting beneath their smile, who was holding a secret behind their eyes. It wasn't mystical, it was simply her way of being alive. And do you know what happened to her? She lost nearly every close relationship she had. Not because she was cruel, not because she judged others, but because people felt naked around her. They couldn't wear their usual masks when she was near. Her presence revealed too much. Her friends would say, "You're too intense," or "You read too much into everything." They'd laugh when they said it, but there was discomfort in the laughter, a subtle edge of fear. They wanted her to stop looking so deeply, to stop noticing. Can't you just relax, they asked. Can't you just have fun? But she couldn't. Because seeing isn't something you can turn off. Once the eyes of awareness open, they stay open. It's like asking someone who can hear music perfectly to suddenly ignore the melody playing in the background. You can try, but you'll still hear it. For Sarah, this sensitivity wasn't a choice, it was constant. Always operating, always showing her what others wanted to keep hidden. That's when I began to understand the truth behind her quiet sadness. It wasn't that she wanted to see, it was that she couldn't stop seeing. And there's something quietly tragic about that. Because perception, when it becomes too sharp, can turn into a blade that cuts both ways. It slices through illusion, yes, but it also slices through belonging. The more she understood people, the more she found herself apart from them. She could read every hidden motive, sense every mask, feel every suppressed emotion, and that meant she could no longer play along. The dance of social illusion had lost its rhythm. That is the first danger of seeing too clearly. The danger of standing outside the play, watching the actors move across the stage, whispering their lines with conviction, while knowing, deep in your bones, that none of it is truly real. And once you see that, the question arises. How do you keep living in a world built on shared pretenses when your eyes can no longer pretend to be blind? There is a second danger, and it arrives quietly, the moment you realize that perception comes with a price. When you see the truth of things, when you perceive what lies beneath the surface of human interaction, you face a painful and inevitable choice. Do you speak, or do you stay silent? If you speak, you risk being attacked. Not physically, no, it's rarely that obvious. The attack is subtle, psychological, emotional. You'll be called negative. You'll be labeled too sensitive, a troublemaker, someone who reads too much into everything. You'll hear, why can't you just let things go? Or, you're imagining problems that don't exist. And if you remain silent, if you swallow what you see to keep the peace, to avoid conflict, something even more dangerous begins to happen. You start to lose touch with yourself. Because each time you deny your perception for the comfort of others, each time you agree to a version of reality you know is false, you fracture your own integrity. You teach yourself that your truth cannot be trusted. You begin to doubt your inner compass, your intuition, the very core of your being. And that fracture grows. Slowly, quietly, invisibly. Until one day you realize that there are two of you living inside the same skin. One that knows. And one that pretends not to know. That's a kind of madness, a soft, creeping insanity that doesn't scream, but hums. A quiet dissonance between the world you see and the world you're expected to accept. I remember once sitting in a meeting. Everyone around me was congratulating themselves on how well a particular project was going. But I could see, as plain as day, that it was collapsing from within. The signs were there, the forced optimism, the subtle avoidance of certain topics, the way people's eyes darted away when uncomfortable questions came up. When I carefully suggested that maybe, perhaps, we should examine a few warning patterns, I wasn't met with curiosity or discussion. I was met with hostility. Not reasoned disagreement, defensiveness. A wall of nervous laughter, sudden irritation, tight smiles. Because I had broken the invisible rule. Don't name what everyone already feels but refuses to face. That's the unspoken contract of social life, we'll all pretend together, as long as no one breaks the illusion. And so the second danger becomes clear. The one who sees too much will always threaten the structure that keeps others comfortable. The truth-teller becomes the problem, not because they're wrong, but because they disturb the fragile balance that holds denial in place. And that leads to the third danger, the one most people never see coming until it's too late. When you see clearly and others refuse to see, they will often redirect their discomfort toward you. Not consciously, not maliciously, but instinctively. It's the ancient reflex of protecting the herd from what feels dangerous. And what feels more dangerous than the person who refuses to play along with the illusion everyone else depends on? I call this the law of the messenger. The one who brings the truth rarely gets thanked for it. When someone points out that the emperor has no clothes, the crowd doesn't rejoice in revelation. The crowd turns, instead, on the messenger. The messenger is ridiculed, silenced, pushed to the margins, because they've disturbed the collective dream. That's the third danger of seeing too clearly. You become the target of the very people you hope to awaken. Your clarity becomes a mirror too bright for others to face. And so they turn away, or worse, they break the mirror. They'll tell you that you're being negative, that you're creating drama, that you're too serious, too intense, too paranoid. Notice how every label points in the same direction. The problem isn't what you see, it's you for seeing it. It's a clever defense, really. If they can convince you that your perception is flawed, they never have to examine what you're perceiving. If they can pathologize your awareness, turn your truth into a sensitivity issue, then the illusion remains intact. The system continues. And you begin to doubt yourself even more deeply. That's how awareness becomes self-destructive. Not through the seeing itself, but through the isolation that follows. The one who sees is blamed for the sickness of the system. You speak the truth, and suddenly you are the disease. It's not personal, it's psychological. Human beings protect their comfort more fiercely than they protect their integrity. And so they project what they cannot face. They turn the spotlight away from the truth and aim it directly at you. This is how the seer becomes the scapegoat. It's not because they're wrong, but because they're right too soon. The timing of truth is everything. Show someone a reality they're not ready to face, and they'll hate you for it. I've watched this pattern unfold again and again, in workplaces, in friendships, in families. The moment someone begins to speak from a place of deep perception, the defenses rise like a tide. You're making things complicated. You're overanalyzing. You always see the negative side. No one realizes that what you're pointing to is not negativity, it's honesty. But honesty, in a world addicted to comfort, feels like cruelty. And so your gift becomes your curse. This is the paradox. You see the invisible threads connecting everything, the truth beneath the surface, the fear behind the anger, the pain beneath the smile, but to others, it looks like disruption. And perhaps that's what makes this kind of awareness so dangerous. Not that it's false, but that it's too true. Too raw. Too honest for a world that depends on shared illusions to keep moving. So what happens to the person who sees too clearly? At first, they try to explain. Then, they try to soften what they say. Eventually, they stop speaking altogether. Because what's the point of sharing what no one wants to hear? Better to stay quiet than to keep bleeding truth into ears that are closed. But silence has its own cost. It's a slow erosion of your spirit. Because even when you stop speaking, the truth doesn't stop whispering inside you. It builds up like pressure in the chest, like unspent energy trapped beneath the ribs. And if you never release it, it begins to consume you from within. This is why so many sensitive, perceptive people look exhausted. They carry not only their own pain, but the pain of everything they perceive. They see the cracks in the walls that others call perfect. They hear the tremor in voices that others call strong. They feel the imbalance in systems that others call stable. And they can't unsee, unhear, or unfeel any of it. It all stays. That's the third danger of awareness. Not that you see the truth, but that the truth refuses to leave you alone. There is a fourth danger, perhaps the most devastating of all, and it hides beneath the gentle act of empathy itself. When you're someone who sees too clearly, you don't just observe the emotions of others, you absorb them. You pick up what's unspoken, what's unfelt, what hasn't even yet reached the surface. You walk into a room feeling perfectly fine, and within minutes, you're carrying the quiet sorrows, the hidden irritations, the unacknowledged fears of everyone around you. It happens so subtly that you hardly notice it. You think you're simply tired, or inexplicably sad, but in truth, you're carrying an emotional weight that isn't yours. You're soaking up invisible energy like a sponge left too long in murky water. And after a while, something begins to shift inside you. You lose track of where you end and everyone else begins. Your feelings blend with theirs, your clarity becomes cloudy, and you start mistaking their storms for your own. This is the quiet exhaustion of awareness. The fatigue that comes from being too open, too permeable, too attuned. It's not compassion that drains you, it's the lack of boundaries between your compassion and their chaos. It's what happens when empathy turns porous. Imagine trying to hear your own voice in a room full of people all talking at once. At first, you think you can distinguish it, you think you can tell which thoughts belong to you. But after a while, all the voices blend together into a single overwhelming noise. And eventually, you forget what your own voice even sounds like. That's what happens to the person who sees too clearly without learning how to protect that clarity. They start disappearing, not dramatically, not all at once, but gradually, almost gracefully. Like a shoreline slowly eroded by the tide. A little less of themselves each day. I've spoken with many people who experience this, deeply perceptive souls who say, I feel like I'm fading. There's less and less of me, and more of everyone else. They're not exaggerating. It's not poetry. It's a real psychological danger. Because when your awareness becomes too wide, too exposed, too unguarded, you begin to lose contact with your own center. You mistake reflection for reality, sensitivity for selfhood. You're not imagining it. Your nervous system is literally processing the tension, pain, and dissonance around you as if it were your own. It's like standing in the middle of a thunderstorm without shelter. You may not be struck by lightning, but you're still drenched by the rain. And the tragedy of this kind of perception is that it can make you feel like a ghost in your own life. Present, but translucent. Aware, but weary. You begin to float between worlds, half inside your own experience, half trapped in the emotional weather of everyone else. It's the high cost of being too attuned to life. You might look at someone across the table and know, before they say a word, that they're hurting. You can sense it, in the way their voice trembles at certain moments, in the way their eyes avoid the truth. You might feel the tension between two people who love each other but can no longer connect. You can sense the quiet despair in the person who smiles too much. And you think, surely, seeing this clearly must mean I can help. But that's the cruel illusion. Because what begins as empathy often becomes entanglement. You start trying to fix what you never broke, to heal what was never yours to heal. And while you reach out to mend the fractures in others, you unknowingly create fractures in yourself. This is why so many people with deep perception struggle with burnout, anxiety, and even despair. Not because their awareness is wrong, but because they've never learned to manage its weight. You see, there's a hidden paradox at work here. The very sensitivity that allows you to understand others can also destroy you if it's left unguarded. To see clearly without boundaries is like walking through life with your skin peeled off. You feel everything, but you have no protection. This is the invisible danger of empathy. The wound that comes from loving the world too much. So, you begin to wonder. Is there any hope for those who see and feel too deeply? Or are they destined to drown in the flood of their own awareness? There is hope, but it begins with understanding that the danger of seeing clearly only becomes dangerous when it's unconscious. When you don't know what's happening to you. When you mistake your sensitivity for madness. When you think there's something wrong with you for noticing too much. Because once you begin to understand the game, once you see that your clarity is not a flaw but a specific form of awareness, everything starts to change. Not because the seeing stops, but because your relationship to it transforms. You stop reacting to every truth you perceive. You stop trying to fix what your awareness reveals. You stop making other people's pain your personal mission. You begin to see that your task is not to heal the world, but to understand it, to hold your clarity gently, rather than wield it like a sword. Because here's the deeper truth. It's not the seeing that destroys you. It's the compulsion to do something about everything you see. You think, if I notice a problem, I must solve it. If I sense pain, I must relieve it. If I see a lie, I must expose it. But this is the real trap, not awareness itself, but attachment to awareness. The belief that perception demands action. That your vision is a call to arms. It isn't. Sometimes, seeing is enough. Sometimes, the act of quiet observation, without judgment, without control, without intervention, is the most powerful thing you can offer. Because truth, left undisturbed, often finds its own way to the surface. But if you jump in to fix what you see, you stir up the waters. You make the muddy river even murkier in your effort to clear it. And this is where many who see clearly lose themselves, in the frantic impulse to rescue, to correct, to cleanse. Not realizing that, in their urgency to save, they are simply deepening the chaos. The water doesn't need your hands to clear it. It needs your stillness. Imagine you're walking beside a river. The water is cloudy, filled with silt and movement. You can see that something beneath the surface is unsettled. You notice it immediately, of course. You always notice. And so your instinct is to help, to make it clear again. You reach down into the water, stir it with your hands, try to push the mud aside, but in your effort, you only make it worse. The water grows darker, heavier, more chaotic. You could have simply watched it. You could have let it clear on its own. The current would have carried the silt away in time. That's the paradox of awareness. The more you try to control what you see, the less clearly you can see it. Because not everything you perceive is meant for your intervention. The mind that sees too much tends to believe that understanding equals responsibility. But wisdom knows the difference. Wisdom says, see what is, and let it be. When you learn to stop trying to fix every problem your awareness reveals, something miraculous happens. Your perception deepens, not by effort, but by surrender. The clearer your seeing becomes, the less you need to interfere. And the more you stop grasping at truth, the more truth comes to you naturally, unforced, unfiltered. There is a freedom in this, a lightness you may not have felt in years. The moment you release the need to heal everyone, to correct every illusion, to awaken every sleeping soul, you finally return to yourself. Because your purpose was never to wake the world, it was simply to remain awake within it. When you understand this, the weight of awareness begins to lift. The exhaustion eases. The loneliness softens. People who once seemed frightened by your clarity start to relax in your presence again, because they can feel that you no longer need them to change. You've stopped demanding that they see what you see. You've stopped needing to be understood. You've learned how to hold your clarity lightly. Think of it this way. When you meet someone who sees you clearly, who knows your insecurities, your fears, your contradictions, but doesn't try to fix or correct you, how does that feel? It feels like freedom. It feels like love without demand. You can breathe again because you're not being forced to awaken before you're ready. You're simply being seen, completely, gently, without judgment. That is what true awareness becomes when it's integrated, not a weapon to expose others' unconsciousness, but a gift of presence that allows others to exist exactly as they are. Seeing clearly doesn't mean approving of everything. It doesn't mean pretending problems don't exist. It means recognizing that not every shadow is yours to chase away. You are not responsible for every lie that exists, every wound that festers, every illusion that holds the world together. You can bear witness without bearing the burden. This is what the Stoics called serene acceptance, not passivity, but profound alignment with reality. It's the understanding that you cannot push the river, you can only flow with it. And here's the deeper paradox. The moment you stop trying to fix everything you see, you actually become more healing to those around you. Because your calm becomes contagious. Your stillness becomes a mirror that others can finally look into without fear. You no longer make them feel exposed or judged. You simply make them feel safe enough to see themselves. The presence of a person who sees clearly yet doesn't demand change is a rare medicine. It invites others to awaken gently, in their own time, in their own way. It's like sunlight on a closed flower. You don't pry the petals open with force, you simply shine, and the flower opens when it's ready. This is the alchemy of awareness. When held wisely, it transforms from burden to blessing. From chaos to calm. From isolation to illumination. But if you cling to it, if you identify with your perception, use it as proof that you are different, deeper, above others, then it turns against you. It becomes a wall instead of a window. It separates instead of connects. Because the danger of seeing too clearly is not only that others may reject you, it's that you may begin to reject them. You might start believing that you're the only one awake, that you alone understand the truth. But that's just another illusion, a spiritual pride disguised as awareness. To see clearly and still remain humble, that is the highest form of seeing. To perceive deeply without needing to control, that is mastery. To know truth and still choose compassion, that is wisdom. So what does it mean to live this way? It means learning to carry your awareness gently, like a candle in a storm, not to set others on fire, but to see your own path clearly. It means learning to stop fighting the darkness and start understanding it, because even the shadows have their purpose. It means realizing that peace doesn't come from not seeing pain, it comes from seeing everything and still choosing to stay at peace. That is the art of true perception. To be awake without being weary. To be sensitive without being shattered. To see through illusion without losing your tenderness for those still living inside it. Because at some point, you realize that everyone is waking up in their own time. Some slowly, some painfully, some not at all, and that's okay. Your role is not to force the dawn, it's simply to hold the light. That's what happens when awareness matures. It no longer burns, it illuminates. It no longer isolates, it connects. And suddenly, the thing that once felt like a curse begins to feel like grace. You realize that the world doesn't need your judgment, it needs your presence. Not your correction, but your quiet understanding. That is the turning point in every soul that has suffered from seeing too much, the moment they stop trying to fix what they perceive and start allowing life to reveal itself in its own rhythm. And in that stillness, in that surrender, something extraordinary happens. You begin to see even more clearly, but without pain, without pressure, without the urge to act. Your awareness becomes like a calm mirror, it reflects truth without distorting it. And that's when people begin to feel safe with you again. Because they no longer sense judgment, they sense peace. They can finally breathe in your presence. And that, perhaps, is the greatest power of all, not to change people, but to give them the space in which change becomes possible. The danger of seeing too clearly is real. It can isolate you, exhaust you, and turn you into a mirror that others can't bear to face. But the gift of it, when carried with understanding, is equally real. Because awareness, when matured, becomes something luminous. It ceases to be a burden you drag through life and becomes instead a quiet light you carry within. But before that light can shine calmly, you must learn the final lesson of perception. That seeing clearly does not mean interfering constantly. It means seeing the truth and staying grounded in your own center. The Stoics used to say, be in the world, but not of it. To see all things without being owned by what you see. To walk through the madness without becoming mad. That is the task of those who see too clearly. Not to escape the world, but to live within it, fully awake and yet profoundly still. And here's the secret, the ones who learn this balance do not lose their depth, they simply stop drowning in it. They learn to let perception flow through them like water through open hands. They no longer cling to every truth, no longer bleed from every insight. They learn the art of letting the world be the world. That's what it means to see clearly and survive it. The art of conscious distance. The people who thrive, who manage to use their awareness without being destroyed by it, have learned one essential thing. Distance without disconnection. They maintain what might be called a conscious distance, not the cold withdrawal of someone who no longer cares, but the serene space of someone who knows where they end and others begin. They can look upon human chaos without internalizing it. They can witness pain without making it their own. They can understand dysfunction without rushing to repair it. It's not indifference. It's discipline. It's compassion that has learned boundaries. And how does one reach this place? It begins with solitude, true solitude, not just physical isolation but inner quiet. Time alone, where you are no longer absorbing anyone else's thoughts or emotions. Time to settle, like muddy water that slowly clears until the bottom is visible again. Because only when the water is still can you see what actually belongs to you. That's the starting point of wisdom, knowing the difference between what is yours to carry and what belongs to the world. Spend time in that stillness, and your perception begins to purify itself. You begin to hear your own voice again, the one that was drowned beneath all the noise. And when you can hear that voice clearly, you can finally trust it. Because that voice, quiet, patient, unwavering, is your true self. It doesn't shout. It doesn't demand. It simply knows. And once you begin to live from that center, you no longer react to every illusion that passes your sight. You observe without absorbing. You witness without collapsing. You see without losing yourself in what you see. The freedom in not knowing. You start to understand that not every truth needs to be spoken. Not every problem needs to be solved. Not every person needs to be awakened. Because people change when they are ready, not when you decide it's time. Consciousness unfolds like dawn, slow and inevitable. You can't rush the sunrise, no matter how much you ache for light. And so you wait. You trust. You let the world ripen in its own time. It's a quiet kind of strength, this patience. The kind that comes from surrender, not resignation. The kind that says, I see what is, and I no longer need to control it. That's the power of someone who sees clearly and yet remains at peace. They move through life like a steady flame, bright, unwavering, undisturbed by the wind. And that flame begins to illuminate others. Not by force, not by persuasion, but simply by example. The calm of one awakened person becomes a silent invitation for others to awaken too. That's how consciousness spreads, not through preaching, but through presence. The companionship of the awake. Perhaps the most beautiful revelation that comes with this maturity is the discovery that you are not alone. For a long time, it feels like you are. Like you're the only one who sees the world's hidden patterns, who hears the faint hum of falseness beneath everyday conversation, who senses the quiet suffering behind polite smiles. But there are others. They exist, scattered across the world like distant lanterns burning in the dark. And one day, almost by accident, you meet one. You recognize them instantly, not by their words, but by the silence between them. They don't flinch from your gaze. They don't fear your depth. They see you, and they don't look away. And in that moment, something inside you exhales. You realize you were never meant to walk this path alone. There are others who live as you do, awake in a world that mostly sleeps. You may not meet many of them, but you don't need to. Just knowing they exist changes everything. Because awareness, when shared, becomes light instead of weight. It's no longer something you carry, it's something you are. The final paradox. So here we are, at the end, or perhaps at the beginning. The danger of seeing too clearly is still there. It will never disappear. Awareness will always isolate, always test your patience, always tempt you to interfere. But now, you understand the deeper truth. The danger only destroys you when you fight it. When you resist it. When you demand that the world conform to your vision of what it should be. When you stop resisting, when you accept that clarity and chaos must coexist, the danger transforms. It becomes possibility. You learn to be conscious without being consumed. You learn to see deeply without drowning in what you perceive. You learn to carry your awareness as a gift rather than a curse. And the irony is, once you stop trying to fix what you see, the world around you begins to heal on its own. Because your stillness becomes the medicine. Your peace becomes the cure. You stop being the restless observer, and you become the calm presence in which truth can unfold naturally. And that is the quiet art of living with eyes wide open in a world that prefers to keep them closed. Epilogue. So, my friend, if you find yourself cursed with clear vision, if you feel too much, see too much, understand too deeply, know this. You are not broken. You are not strange. You are simply awake. An awakening will always feel lonely at first, because most of the world is still dreaming. But keep your eyes open. Keep your heart soft. Keep walking. Somewhere ahead, you'll find others who are awake too. And when you do, the world won't seem quite so dark. Because together, your lights will begin to overlap. And dawn will come quietly, not as a shout, but as a breath. Spreading softly across a sleeping world. That is the hope within the danger. That is the blessing within the burden. That is the art of seeing too clearly. And still choosing to love what you see.